Hi guys. Today we're going to go over what's called the cognitive behavioral therapy model of emotions. And we're going to be going over in this reading the idea of how the three parts of our functioning sort of contribute to this cycle of anxiety. And so we're first going to start off talking about how anxiety is adaptive, how it kind of switches into different ways of presenting itself. So picture this. You're Kronk the caveman. You hear a rustling noise behind you and think, oh, that's probably just Grog back from his berry picking. You don't even look up from your pile of sticks as you say, hey Grog, it's your turn to patrol the cave. But it turns out it's not Grog. It's a tiger, and it pounces before you even have a chance to process. Not a very good day for Kronk. Now, scenario B, you hear a rustling noise behind you and your hair automatically stands up on end. Your heart beats faster. You start to sweat and your muscles tense up. You scan the perimeter of your cave and notice movement in the bushes. You think, this must be danger, and begin to run into your safe cave, evading the tiger and surviving another day. A fear response to actual danger is adaptive. It's healthy and it's life-saving. But responding with anxiety to situations that are not actually dangerous can get in the way of your functioning. Think of a smoke alarm. When there's fire, the smoke alarm provides an important signal to leave the house and put out a fire. But when the smoke alarm goes off without any actual fire, it's a nuisance. Imagine if every time a false alarm sounded, you responded it as if there was a real fire by grabbing the fire extinguisher, running out of the house, and calling 911. All because you burned a slice of bread with the toaster. Anxiety is a false alarm that signals danger even when there isn't any present. So can you imagine that? And just helping your brains to start thinking about anxiety as sometimes a false alarm. It puts us into a panic and it puts us into a pretty extreme emergency response when we're really not under any danger or we're not under any threat. So our goal is to learn strategies to treat these experiences just like false alarms rather than true fires, and recognizing the difference, right? So the CBT model of emotions. CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, breaks emotions down into three parts. We have our thoughts, our physical sensations, how our body experiences things, the things that happen in our bodies, and our behaviors, the things that we do, how we act. So say you're afraid of dogs and you see a dog coming toward you along the sidewalk. You feel afraid. That's your emotion. You think, a thought, that dog might bite me. That's your thought. Your palms get sweaty, your breath quickens, and your heart speeds up. That's your physical sensation. Finally, you cross to the other side of the street. That is your behavior. So you have your thought, your physical sensation, and you have your behavior, all in that example, just by seeing the dog. That's the trigger. As you can see, your emotions, your thoughts, your sensations, and behaviors are all interconnected, right? They all influence one another. And each of these parts play a role in maintaining and strengthening the emotion that you feel. Each of these parts can trigger a full-blown anxiety cycle. It's important to note that there's always a trigger to anxiety. It may just be hard to identify because our reactions are so often automatic. We're not always thinking about them. So they just sort of happen and we don't notice what the influence was, what kind of started the cycle. So changing one of these parts, either the thoughts, the sensations, or the behaviors, can start to help you break out of the cycle. For example, if you were in the same exact situation as before with the dog and thought, hey, that's a really adorable dog, you probably wouldn't cross the street or even notice any of those bodily sensations. Or if you had kept walking without avoiding the dog, you might have learned through that experience that it's just a harmless dog. And that might in turn lead you to have less anxiety the next time you face a dog. So it starts building evidence for you just by developing this new experience, right? Evidence that it can be a positive thing, running into a dog that typically you would maybe have been anxious about. You might be wondering why you've never noticed these separate but interconnected factors before. When you're in the thick of a negative emotion, everything is just an overwhelming blur of fear and anxiety. So we're just not able to notice it as much when we're in it. Our goal is to help you break down these anxiety tornadoes so you can tease out the pieces and manage them separately instead of getting lost in this glob of them, right? Here's another way to show how connected these pieces are. If you start feeling sweaty and notice your breathing speed up, you might think, whoa, something is wrong with my body. If you think something is wrong, your heart might start racing and your muscles might tense up. That unpleasant bodily response just then confirms to your thoughts that something really is wrong with your body. So then you might try to do something with yourself in order to get rid of those sensations. So you might run to the kitchen to get a drink of water. But what happens when, this behavior at first seems like a great idea, but then because you're feeling nervous, maybe your hands are shaking, you end up dropping the glass on the floor, it shatters and water spills everywhere. What happens then? It only makes you more anxious, right? Because that's part of the cycle. And that's how all of these factors feed into each other to create this difficult experience to get out of. An endless cycle of anxiety can be created just through that scenario. I like to sometimes reframe it by thinking about anger as the emotion instead of, fear. So I don't know about you guys, but I can say for myself that there are certainly times when we can become angry, and the angrier we become, the harder it is to get out of that anger experience. So for example, let's say you're really angry about something. So you run to your room and you are so mad that you decide to just slam your door. But what happens when there's a sock in the way? And the more you try to slam your door, it doesn't work. It just bounces back at you. Well, I don't know about you, but that would make me more and more agitated, right? More and more angry. Therefore, I'm not thinking clearly. I'm not able to make good rational decisions and say, maybe I should stop and find out what's happening to the door and why it's not slamming like I want it to do. So instead, we just keep slamming the door harder and harder. What may happen then? What happens if I then get my finger stuck in the door and I end up slamming the door on my finger? I become even more enraged, right? And then you're even thinking less clearly. And so after that situation, you are so angry, so over the top, that you finally get the door slammed, get rid of the sock, and then your favorite picture that's hanging on your wall falls off the wall and smashes to pieces. So in that example, we can see how the emotion just builds and builds and becomes this huge spiraling out of control scenario because one thing feeds off of the other and one thing leads to the other. But if we are to sort of stop ourselves and intervene at any point to try to change that cycle, we may be a little more successful in getting what we want out of the situation. So going back to the example of feeling anxious, trying to, help our bodies by responding more appropriately getting a glass of water and then ending up dropping the water and all that kind of stuff, which makes us more anxious. It says, if you had stayed in the situation and observed how your sensations affected your thoughts and behaviors, you might have noticed that in most situations, even the most unpleasant thoughts and sensations gradually will go away on their own. A lot of times we don't give it enough time to notice that. Anxiety tries to get you to escape or avoid unpleasant situations, and that may provide a short-term relief, but it doesn't show you how to handle the situation the next time it comes up, which it probably will. I mean, we can think of countless times probably where we've been able to get around or avoid situations that make us feel anxious, but they usually pop up again, or sometimes it's a slightly different scenario. I mean, if we're, let's say, for example, anxious about being in crowded places, well, sure, there's maybe sometimes that we can avoid having that happen, but not always, and it's going to continue to pop up, and it doesn't necessarily mean the anxiety is going to go away unless we sort of learn how to manage it in that situation. So if you guys would like to now go on to your Google Classroom and fill out the Google form with some questions about the CBT model of emotions, and make sure you submit that into me, that would be great. Thanks.